Hey folks, welcome back to another top 10 list with yours truly, Sam Healey. I am currently going through my top 10 game mechanisms of all time, and I have hit my top 10 action point allowance system games. Who came up with that name? I don't know, but they need a course in being less verbose. But action point allowance systems is basically when it comes to your turn, you have a certain number of action points, or you have a certain allowance of things that you can do on your turn. And usually it's limited by some number. And you know that you're going to get that many turn actions every single turn unless something else dictates otherwise, some kind of effect that is on your character or some type of card that somebody played against you, or limits it or bonuses it, or whatever it might be. Now, I know most of you are thinking right now, this is not a core mechanism. And you're right, for the most part it isn't. But these are games that I enjoy playing partially and part because of the action point allowance system that it offers. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to it. Now, my number 10 is a game that has a strange theme. And mainly because I never read the books upon which they are based, or this world is based, and that is the Discworld universe, I believe by Terry Pratchett. This game is called Clax, a Discworld board game. Now, the whole theme behind this is that apparently in these books, the way or a system of communication between one part of the country and another are these light towers, and each much like Morse code or something to that effect, each letter has a different light pattern that you would shine through these towers, and you would build messages with the light towers, and that's how you communicated one of the ways. Well, in this game, you are trying to get a message from one point to the next. There's two ways you can play it. You can play cooperatively or competitively. If you're playing cooperatively, everybody is playing against the mail system that is in the game, or in the books rather. So there's that. But basically, it's a really interesting thing where you're trying to manipulate the different light panels of your tower and send the right message. Whoever is able to send the right message first is the winner, or if you beat the mail service, you've beaten the game. So I really enjoy it. There's only a certain number of things you can do on your turn because of that action point allowance system, and that's where the tension comes in. You want to do this, or you want to do, but you just can't because you ran out of actions or what have you. So I really enjoy it. A lot of really cool card play in this game. My number 10, Clax, a Discworld board game. Now, my number 9's inclusion on this list might come as somewhat of a surprise because I wasn't too savvy on the game to begin with. It was one of my most anticipated games last year, and that is Age of Thieves. Now, for some reason, the game just didn't really click with me on the whole. But your action point allowance system is what really shined in this game, and that's why I included it on the list. You can only do a certain number of things on your turn, and that's really, really a tension-filled part. The general gist of the game is that each person is a thief trying to break into this city, get to the palace, steal the royal jewel, and get out before the doors and the gates close down upon them. Or you're just trying to score the most points. If you're not the one who is able to get that royal gem, score the most points and get out before those gates close. But the tension comes because of all of this different stuff. And here you also have a simultaneous action selection almost because there's just so many different things. You have a hand of cards that you're able to do. You have to choose which ones. It's a really interesting game. The action point allowance system really sung in it for me, though. Unfortunately, it was kind of the high point for me in the entire game. I liked the theme, I liked the board, I liked the miniatures, I liked a lot of different things about it, but it just was kind of all together. When you take it all together, it was nah. So it was a little bit of a disappointment because it was one of my most anticipated games that year, but I still enjoy it. It just doesn't get to the table very often because it is kind of a quirky game. But my number 9, Age of Thieves. My number 8 is a game called High Heavens, where it's a 2-player game where one person is taking on the role of the pantheon, the Greek pantheon, or the Roman pantheon, or the Egyptian pantheon, and you're basically having you're duking it out in the clouds, and you're trying to basically knock out the other person. The reason this one made the list is because, first of all, it has great miniatures. It's largely been overlooked, unfortunately. It was a Kickstarter, but it was a really good Kickstarter. Really enjoyed it. But basically, with many of these other games, there's the tension that is within this action point allowance system. Only having a certain number of things you can do really makes you think hard about what's the best thing to do here, what's the best thing to do there. Sometimes you might want to step back, especially in High Heavens. You might want to step back, not attack this round, and wait for them to move around. Hopefully, they'll move into a better position for you to pounce on them later. It's just a lot of positioning and working your way around in this. A lot of cool special abilities as well that each of the different characters have. So really fun game in my opinion. My number 8, High Heavens. My number 7 is a game put out by Gale Force 9. It is a World War II tank game called Tanks, where each side will take a certain number of tanks depending on how many points you guys are playing with, and you're trying to take the other team out, basically. Now, what this is cool is because, like many of the other games, you're having to really strategize and sometimes be very tactical about the action points that you have at your disposal. Maybe you don't want to move your full movement. Maybe you want to stay in cover. Maybe you want to take a shot and then move back into cover. There's a number of different choices that you can make with your action points in this game, and that's why I really like it. Another thing is, has really neat tank miniatures that do come on sprues. You do have to put them together, but because they come on sprues, you can make them look as you want them to look, and it's not just some mold that somebody else thought looked cool. You can make this tank look the way that you want it to look, with all of the different things that you can glue onto it and so forth. So that's a really cool thing. I really enjoyed this game a lot. You guys should check it out if you haven't had a chance to. That is my number 7, Tanks. Now my number 6 I have to apologize for because it's not actually available yet. But I got to play this at the Gathering of Friends when we went to Toronto for our day trip to Snakes and Lattes. And we got to play Wasteland Express Delivery Service. Now, at the core, this is a pick up and deliver game. But because of the theme and all of the immersive elements that are in it, it doesn't really feel like that. It is, but it just, you get immersed into the theme. It's a post-apocalyptic, Mad Maxian type vibe that's going on with it, and it was a really fun game. And sometimes you just didn't have the points that you needed, the action points that you needed to get to where you needed to go, so you had to be very tactical on where you stopped, because you don't want to run into these roving bands of marauders that are trying to just blow your cargo up. You're trying to just find the best place, the best route, so to speak, with the action points that you have to get where you need to go so that you can sell your cargo for those that want to pay top dollar for it. Had a really great time. It is on the long side, but I had a really great time playing it, and I just felt that it needed to be mentioned here. It is a great game, and you guys should be looking forward to it here in the next few months. That is my number 6, Wasteland Express Delivery Service. Now, starting with my number 5, we're really starting to get into the cream of the crop, so to speak, as far as I'm concerned at least. This is my list after all, right? But this is where the action point allowance system, these games, really starts to sing, and it really feels like more of a core mechanism than some of these other games that I've already mentioned, because the things that you can do, be successful at or fail at, really hinges upon how many things you can do during the course of the turn. Now, with my number 5, Level 7 Omega Protocol, it has an interesting twist to it, because you do have a set number of actions that you can perform on your turn, but what you do during those actions can either help the Overlord a little bit or a lot, depending on what kind of things that you're doing. Because some of the actions that you'll choose to do cause, I can't remember the word that they use, but they cause fear or something to that effect. And the Overlord player uses that fear to kind of fuel the things that he wants to do on his turn. So the more actions that you do that cause that, the more currency he has to spend to carry out his actions during the Overlord phase. And I thought that was an interesting thing. Just the marriage of those two mechanisms was really seamless, and I really enjoyed it. So that's my number 5, level 7 Omega Protocol. Now my number 4 is probably one of the most basic games on my list. Yeah, probably so. But I think that the action point allowance system in this and how your other players who you are working cooperatively with can help you raise that to maybe go the extra mile, so to speak, and get that city knocked out of all those viruses. I think it's really important. But a pandemic is my number 4 for action, the action point allowance system. Now, the reason I say that is because you only have a certain number of things you can do on your turn. And sometimes you need to do more than that, which is frustrating, honestly. But because it's a cooperative game and because the other players' special abilities can help other people get around and so that they can actually squeeze a little bit more out of their turn than would normally happen, that's why it made my list. That cooperation between the different characters and how the powers of the different characters really kind of work well together in getting a little bit more out of your turn on average than just your allotted number of action points. So that's my number 4, Pandemic. Now my number 3 is widely regarded as simply a zombie game, and I usually cry foul about that because I think it's, while it's set against the backdrop of a zombie apocalypse, it's really just a post-apocalyptic semi-cooperative game about surviving. I'm talking about Dead of Winter. Now, with Dead of Winter, you have a certain number of things you can do on your turn, as with all of these other games, but the tension comes because sometimes it might be better for you to spend your action points doing this, but it might be better for the group if you spent your action points doing that. And that's where the tension really comes into the game. There's a betrayer that everybody's kind of keeping an eye out for during the course of the game, and if you do the wrong thing or what corporately everybody thinks you should be doing, and if you do something different, well, you might get those crosshairs put up on your back because everybody thinks you're the betrayer now, or you might not be. So you really have to be wise about what you're doing. You want to get your things accomplished, your goals accomplished, but you also want to make sure you're helping the group get the main goal accomplished as well. So using your actions wisely in this game is very important, and that's why I like it so much. My number 3, Dead of Winter. Now my number 2 is a Viking game called Fire and Axe, a Viking saga. Now your action points in this game is actually pretty cool because it's tied thematically into the game. The number of things that you can do on your turn is basically translated by how many days at sea you can, how many days you can be at sea without having to lose goods or crewmen or whatever it might be. And I like that. And that's one of the reasons why it made my list so high, is because it wasn't just the mechanism that they employed. They also found a thematic tie-in to why you have these certain number of action points. And that's really cool for me because it makes it seem less like a mechanism and more like a storyline at that point. So that's my number 2, Fire and Axe, of Viking Saga. I really enjoy this game a lot. If you have not tried it, please do so. And finally, my number 1 action point allowance system game is Rum and Bones Second Tide. We just did a live playthrough of this a few days ago because we got a new crew expansion in the Hammers of Ragnarok. So basically we got to play it. The reason I like this is because this kind of does feel like this is the core mechanism of the game, because every time you activate heroes you have a certain number of action points you can do. You can activate your crew, which basically just you can do a couple of different things because they move pretty much on their own, but activating heroes really brings that action point allowance system to the forefront in the game, and you really have to be careful about how you use those different actions because some of the heroes are not as strong as the others. They could get taken out pretty quickly by some awesome rolling on your opponent's part. So I really, really enjoy this game. I enjoyed the first version of it. Second Tide is even better. So I can't say enough how much you guys need to give this game a try and see whether or not you like it. Well, that is my 10 action point allowance system games. Really need to find a shorter way to say that. Let me know in the comments what you think. Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you agree with some of them? Do you not agree with others? I like to stop by and talk with you guys every once in a while. All I ask is that you be civil, of course, and treat each other with respect and treat me with respect, and I'll return that in kind. But I do appreciate you guys watching. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. And hey, we'll see you guys on the flip side.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.